I think it was not just first years. It was the first half of my 14 years was just about figuring out how to sustain yourself in the system. Because I saw like European athletes are some of the best athletes in the world. So how do they cope with all these stress and strains? How do they cope with the financial battles? How do they cope with understanding the sport itself? So I landed in Copenhagen. I was aware of a couple of ice skating clubs locally, Scandinavia. I reached out to them like, hey, I'm from India. I want to pursue ice skating. Can you help me? They're like, yeah, sure, why not? Ironically enough, the ice skating club in Copenhagen is run by a Dutch guy. So he kind of just literally like welcomed me over, give me the keys of the clubhouse, like give me the key, tell the skate, go on. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know anything. Like, oh, okay, I'll teach you. So he taught me how to sharpen the blades, and yeah, that's it. That's how I started.
High-speed skating is the career up for discussion on today's podcast. Our guest today has gone on to set world records and put India on the map for ice skating. He currently trains as an elite athlete in the Netherlands. With over 65 other national records, he surely has proven himself as a master of the sport. Speed skating as a sport does not see much participation in India, but his achievements have helped bring some more awareness across the country. In today's podcast, we not only discuss his journey, but also talk about his advice for young athletes out there, ways in which they can train, also ways in which they can find their coaches. It is my pleasure to introduce Vishwaraj Jadeja on today's podcast and discuss with him the journey of his job. So let's hit that subscribe button and the post notification bell and get started with our first ever podcast on career in sports. Hey Vishwaraj, welcome on to the Career Show. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us today from the Netherlands. So excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. When you guys reached out to me earlier, I was a bit like, well, are you sure you want career advice from a college dropout who has been, toiling away for the most of his life, So I think I'm curious about your questions, and I hope your listeners are able to take something away from this conversation.
Well, I'm super excited to talk to you how your journey transitioned from being a college dropout to becoming such a famous ice skater for India. So let's get started off by talking about the fact that you are from a part of India that is Ahmedabad, where there is no ice, there is no snow. How did your passion for ice skating come along?
I think sports in general. I come from a third generation of athletes in the family.
Mhm.
So my grandfather used to play hockey for the university team. Then my father and my aunt used to be on the national top for roller skating in India and national champions at some point. And then one of my aunts, she represented India in 1983 at the World Championships for figure skating, roller figure skating. So I think picking up sports was normal. Picking up previous sports was even more normal. But the benchmark set by my previous generation in the house, in the family, were high enough to make sure that if I took up a sport, it was serious enough, and my goals were high enough and justifiable also to pursue them. So the idea, like eventually, I started doing roller skating seriously, roller speed skating seriously, and then inline speed skating seriously. National gold, state champion for a couple of years, 5 6 years in a row, participated at the nationals. So I think at some point I found out that hey, I'm going to dedicate so much time of my life towards the sport. It might as well be for an Olympic sport. And the roller skating is not in the Olympics in that sense. Like roller skating, speed skating is not in the Olympic charter yet. And when you dedicate 10 years or more to a sport, you want to represent the sport and your country at the highest level of for sport, and that is the Olympics, obviously. And so the one of the most closest sports I thought was long track ice skating or long track speed skating, and that's it. That's where my heart was set on, and then the pursuit began.
Mhm. Well, that transition from roller skating to ice skating is simply amazing.
The transition, obviously, it looks very similar, but it is very different because on inline skates you have those wheels. So there's like 3 to 4 contacts to the ground. So then when you push, you can cheat a little bit with the pressure on your feet. But
Mhm.
on ice skates, it's only one point of contact, which is your blade. So you have to be more precise and it's more technical. Your, you have to optimize your power to weight ratio and so on and so forth. Long track ice skating is one of the more elite sports in the world. Elite sports, when I say it's one of the most hardest sports to qualify for, forget the medals, just to qualify for the Winter Olympics in general, because it was a part of the first Winter Olympics which was ever organized. It's just like the 100-meter run, which is very difficult to qualify for, also for the finals. Because 100 meters also was in part of the first, traditionally the first Olympics ever done. So, yeah.
Super interesting. You just mentioned a lot about Olympics, right? You want to represent your country. I mean, every sport athlete wants to do that. When did this dream of participating in the Olympics come to you? Do you remember that first instance?
I mean, Olympics always was this mythical place. For me, I grew up in the 90s. I'm 35 now. So we didn't have any phone, any internet at the time. So you just look at all these newspaper articles about the Olympics happening. And I asked my father, like, hey, how do you go there? And he's like, yeah, it's one of those things that you work hard enough, you can make it. And there was, as I said, like for sports questions, every time I had them for my parents, there was never a doubt that they never, in that sense, like they never discouraged me, but also the fact that they were very neutral about it. Like, these are the facts, but education also is a fact. So it was all a factual matter of life. They were not discouraging me or encouraging me for sports or education. It was just a matter of fact. Like, okay, if you study, you will do this. If you do sports, you will do this. What do you want to choose? Everything is going to be difficult and everything might kill you. So you decide in that sense. And I think Leander Pace, when he won that medal at Atlanta Olympics '96, it was plastered all over the news papers. And that was the first time I saw something else but cricket in the news, on the newspapers at least. So I was like, okay, this is something interesting. So I guess it was always there when you see your fellow countrymen doing these things, like achieving these great feats. And I think obviously Olympics is the Olympics. It's the final frontier. It is the greatest frontier for sport. And that is why I was like, all right, cool. Let's do that. Let's do that.
You mentioned your parents were neither encouraging you, neither discouraging you. You mentioned you're a dropout at the start of the call. Do you want to take us through that entire journey from being in engineering college, transitioning into a dropout? How was that entire journey for you with your family and within yourself as well?
I was very clear that I want to be an athlete, professional athlete. I want to perform at the highest level of the sport I do. So it required a certain amount of dedication, required a certain amount of time and energy you need to put in. So every time you set a goal, you set a dream, you need to give it energy, you need to give it time. So which I realized that our education system, the incredible education system we have, was not going to allow me to do that. So I just had to be smart about it. I was like, I'll do enough. I'll make sure that I am able to do enough to get by in the education system. But most of my focus was always on the sport. And I did get by, I did get by. I got into I got into engineering college. It was not just get into engineering. I had to clear my 12th science. But when I cleared my 12th science, I also won a national gold for roller skating in that year. And I come back from nationals in 2 weeks. We have the 2 or 4 weeks, I think we had the board exam for the 12th science. But then we had the earthquake. So then in 2003 Gujarat we had the earthquake. 2002, 2003 we had the earthquake. So then it was all delayed. But yeah, so I think that was And then for me, education was a means to an end. Like keep on pursuing this so that my mom would not get too disappointed in me. I was more worried about that. Like, okay, if I stop education, then my mother will be very disappointed in me that she didn't study. So then, so like education, spell science, engineering, all of that happened. At some point, went on to develop the Indian team for inline hockey, which is the summer version of ice hockey. Went on to the Asian Championship first time as a vice captain or assistant captain for the Indian team. At some point, you have to take that call. Like, what are you going to do? And my motivation always was, like, okay, even if I'm studying, I need to figure out how to get to the place where the industry actually is, or where the sport is actually pursued at a higher level. and Asian Championships and Asian Games is all the only in Asia, and World Championships and world. I mean, like everything international. And when you're talking about becoming a superpower, India is a superpower. You need to compete with the best.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just compete with a certain level of people and claim like, oh yeah, this is what it is. Like we keep on celebrating mediocrity. How will you pursue perfection? There was no real thought actually when I stopped studying. Like when I dropped out. Like, at some point, I had enough fees, gathered enough fees, money to pay education fees or pay for my, pay for the sport. And there was not a single iota of a doubt. Like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Education. Sorry.
You just said that you were worried that you would disappoint your mother if your grades were not up to the mark, right? How did you deal with that feeling when you decided to drop out, pack your bags, and go to Netherlands or go to Europe? Because I think that's something that a lot of students my age still feel. They do not want
Yeah.
to disappoint their parents. How do you deal with that? And how did you do it?
I'm very cold in that sense, to be honest. I grew up in the 90s in India, or I grew up in the 90s in Gujarat and Ahmedabad. I had seen enough. I had seen enough of dark times in the city to make me realize that if I want to do something fruitful in my life, which is epic and legendary, I'll have to make some hard calls. And I truly believed in my hopes and dreams and goals, and that allowed me to make that decision and make that call. And my mom still tells me like sometimes you can be really cold, and I'm like, yeah, I can definitely. And leaving your parents is not just easy. It is difficult. Leaving your family behind. I've not seen my family in a year and a half almost now because of the pandemic. I'm afraid that if I go to India, the preparation will be hampered because what if there's a lockdown or what if I contract the virus or whatever, one of the other things you have to be very careful. So yeah, no, I'm very cold in that sense. And the thing is, I believe very much in what I wanted to do. I think the self-belief without reason, was something which was very, and that's what also my parents, my family around me, everybody know that, okay, if he sets his mind to something, you cannot be in his way. If you are in his way, then please forget about it. Yeah.
So you decided to pack your bags and leave for Europe. I'm
Hmm.
sure that would have been a super hard decision and a super hard transition as well from India. How were those
Yeah.
first few days for you going away from home and pursuing ice skating?
So moving from India to Europe, you obviously, I have an Indian passport. I'm an Indian person, so you need a visa wherever you want to be. So one of the things I did was I took admission in a school, in a college, to pursue computer science. And the course was easy enough that I thought like, hey, I can pursue this and I'll still get a degree. My mom will be happy and I'll still be able to pursue sports. Took a student loan because the idea was that the parents were like, yeah, we can't afford it in the first place. And plus, even if we could have afforded it, we need it here because, the family is big, everybody needs to be looked after. So you'll have to figure it out on your own. Then you can go. I was like, okay, no problem. Took a student loan, it was approved, it was a process. Oh, God, it was a process. Then visa and all of those things happened. Don't get me wrong, like all that happened over the span of 6 months. It was not just an
Mhm.
overnight thing. That is where your commitment towards your goals, hopes, and dreams comes into play.
Mhm.
Like, what are you able? How much patience are you able to have? Keep, you know. And so my parents also were like, it was like a completely nonchalant situation in the household. Like they knew that I was going up to this, but at the same time, they were like, well, you know, what if it doesn't go through? So we don't want to build our hopes up, or whatever, or build your hopes up. Also. Like, you might get disappointed. So I think over the period of time, it came through, and I was surprised also at some point because I didn't get distinction grades in the 12th time, but still I was okay. They said like I was very good at in my interview. So I had to clear 3 rounds of interviews and I was fine. And I was like, oh, wow, that's good. So I guess that happened. And then moving to Europe and getting introduced to the European education system also, I was completely blown away. I was like, what have I been doing all my life? But at some point there was an opportunity. I was just going through a newspaper one of the days and it says study in Denmark. So Denmark is a little country in Scandinavia. And I knew that I wanted to be in the Netherlands. Netherlands is where long track ice skating is like what cricket is to India. So like I have to be here if I want to pursue this thing seriously and for a long term. And so Denmark, I was like, okay, I opened the atlas, I opened the map. Denmark and Holland, yeah, close enough, 1,000 kilometers, not too much. And yeah, basically that was it. And then I moved there.
But how did your journey with ice skating start in Europe? How was the first few years and days with ice skating? How did that journey start in Europe?
I think it was not just first years, it was the first half of my life. I mean, half of this 14 years was just about figuring out how to sustain yourself in the system. Because I saw like European athletes are some of the best athletes in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they cope with all these stress and strains? How do they cope with the financial battle? How do they cope with understanding the sport itself? So it was mainly just to optimize my way of living. So I landed in Copenhagen. I was aware of a couple of ice skating clubs locally, Scandinavia. I reached out to them like, hey, I'm from India. I want to pursue ice skating. Can you help me? They're like, yeah, sure, why not? Ironically enough, the ice skating club in Copenhagen is run by a Dutch guy. So he kind of just literally like welcomed me over, gave me the keys of the clubhouse, like this is the key, yeah, the skate, go on. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know anything. Like, oh, okay, I'll teach you. So he taught me how to sharpen the blades. I had to go participate in. I knew there was a Scandinavian Open Cup happening in Sweden, which is just across the border from Denmark. And I was like, all right, I have to go there. I need skates, a pair of skates. So my first race or first time on the ice was on a borrowed pair of skates from a club in Copenhagen. And yeah, it was a competition. I got disqualified in the first and the last competition ever. And yeah, that's it. So that's how I started.
Is that how you found your coach as well?
Subsequently, what happened was that was a disastrous weekend racing wise because I didn't know anything. The Swedish coaches at the races, they kind of helped me sharpen my blades better. They made me understand a lot about the sport. And then I realized, oh, it's going to be a long journey. It's not just showing up somewhere, picking up a pair of skates and showing up. It is you need to give it 15 years. The Dutch European skaters give it 20 years to just because they've been pursuing it for a longer period of time and they pick it up early in life. So it was real. Like that, they gave me it was just real. It just got real very quick. And I was at the time doing like 4 jobs just to make ends meet. I was like, oh wow, oh god, this is gonna be crazy, So it's just that was one of those things. And then subsequently, a couple of months later, I was again at the same track, another race, and I did a national record on the 3 kilometers because there was nobody who had done that before, obviously. So was the first one to explore the long distances on the long track. And I was like, ooh. And then that is when the Dutch journalists picked it up and then they wrote about it in the Dutch magazine and newspapers. And at the time, Yahoo Group was something which was still big. And somebody emailed me about it, like, hey, isn't this you? Like, oh, yeah, that's me. And then I reached out to that journalist. I told him, like, hey, I'm looking for a Dutch coach if you can help me. They're like, oh, yeah, I can do something for you. And then he said, I'll make a story for you that you're looking for a coach in Holland. And then we'll see which coaches revert. And my coach, Wim Newhouse, was one of the 3 coaches who reverted back. And history goes like, he's one of the hardest coaches out here and also the most educated enough, level wise. He has one of the highest levels of education for coaching, for speed skating. And he's one of the hardest difficult coaches because his training program is very hard. And I like it. And for us growing up in India, gurus are very important. So for me, finding a guru was very important. And I got introduced to him. And I call him. And the first conversation we have basically was, hey, Wim, this is Vish. I want to do long track speed skating with you. And his reaction was like, yeah, if you're crazy enough to come all the way from India to pursue my sport, I'm crazy enough to coach you. Let's start. And start we did. 250 races, 65 national records, couple of international podiums, Asian Winter Games also. And last year was our highlight where we won 4 medals at the Winter Games Masters, which was incredible. At a traditional outdoor track, racing in the snow and the rain and the cold. I fell ill afterwards.
Yeah. Well, firstly, congratulations, because those achievements are simply amazing. But like you said, for everyone in sports, a coach is like a guru. And being in winter sports, especially in India, there are not as many coaches as you would have for cricket, right? So how can one student find their coach? Well, it goes without saying they need to go out of their way and work even harder. But how does one find that coach in winter sports?
I think for me, I did not also. I mean, I found a mentor. So for me, Shiva Keshwan, he's like a 6-time Winter Olympian for India. So I reached out to him directly, like, hey, I want to pursue winter sports. What do you think? Like, So I think it was also like every sport or every like winter sports will have such mentors are out there, and obviously they need to know your intent. So
Mhm.
I kind of reached out to him after I did my first match. He's like, oh, like, hey, finally I've done this. What do you think? And then kind of we developed a friendship, and then over the years we've just been in touch, and now we are trying to do something together to advise on some projects in India for winter sports development. But I'm hopeful that even the administration and the government are asking some good questions now. So in future, I guess kids will not have that much of a problem to pursue into
Mhm.
sports. But yeah, I think as long as I think it's you have to look within first. How badly do you want it, and what are you able to sacrifice, and what do you want are open to being sacrificed. Like I think
Mhm.
that's where it starts from, and then eventually you'll find your way. I think, and you'll find a guided way also to a mentor in that sense, and then
Mhm.
coach comes subsequently and so on.
I'm so happy you mentioned that you and your colleague are starting something that is going to help these athletes who are interested in winter sports because let's be honest, until this December, I did not even know that ice skating or skiing or any such sports was so big in the north of India because I had never seen that, right? I've visited the places itself and I've still not seen it.
They have to change that. I mean, for example, in Ladakh, okay, has been pretty isolated from the rest of the country for the longest time. But ice hockey is thriving there. You know, ice hockey over there is thriving. It is bigger than soccer and cricket together. So I guess, but again, they need more resources at some point of time. They cannot just
Mhm.
live off or survive off NGO support from international foundation support from different organizations and foundations
Mhm.
because that is social work. That is not development of sport.
Mhm.
So at some point, it has to transition from that to development of the sport. So we are hoping, I'm hopeful that we are able to, change that to that. And
Talking about Leh and Ladakh and the medals that you won last year, I also came across this article of yours which mentions that you set an unofficial record in Leh in the state of Jammu and Kashmir on one of the lakes. And I think that's a super interesting story. Do you want to take us through how did you come across that and how was that entire journey?
so initially, 2018 Winter Olympics was the goal, but build up to that, it was a disaster. I had a couple of crashes. There was no financial support. Whichever the sponsors were in the end or the support which was there, they all pulled out at the last moment. Mentally, it was very nerve wracking. And when that happens, you try to put extra effort into performance and preparation, and you do a bit you go overboard, and you end up injuring yourself. So I guess that year was not meant to be. I could not walk for a month almost because of those injuries I had sustained on my body. But then at the time, I was in a very dark place. And one of my friends who's a musician, he told me like, "Vish, you should go to the mountains of the Himalayas to find yourself." And I was like, a month later, I put a plan together, going and ice skating on some of the highest frozen lakes in the world. And where else to start was from but India, because then I knew about the ice skating culture or ice skating sport, ice hockey as a sport in Ladakh. I'm like, hey, I'll reach out to these people and it'll be fine. I called a friend of mine from school. He himself also was an athlete himself, Ravi Mistry, and he runs like a successful photography, videography company now for weddings. I'm like, hey, I want to do this. Would you like to come and capture it? Okay, let's do
Mhm.
it. Next thing we know, we have found one, two sponsors for it, and then we go and we do it. And that's where I kind of unearthed this whole on thin ice situation where we want to explore one of the highest frozen lakes of the world. First, it's being in India, and subsequent year, 2019, I actually put together a proper crew. We went to a higher lake, Pangong So first, and then now it was Somoriri, and we did an official 5 kilometers at
Wow.
4,500 meters.
Wow.
It was I mean, obviously, that's a different podcast altogether.
Mhm.
But but then I was able to find a way where back to my sport, back to wanting to pursue this whole green from the mountains of the Himalayas. To be honest, like I was on those frozen lakes, I skated there. The freedom of skating on these frozen lakes was incredible. I like it. I can do this. Let's make the most of it and let's keep going.
I want to change gears and ask you, how can one promote winter sports in the country, which will also help students pursue it more?
I think promote sports first. we are not at the level of promoting winter sports or summer sports. It's just, I think we are, as a country, as a sporting nation, we are still at a level where we need to just promote sports and play. Get kids out there to just go running, like pick up a ball and throw at each other or something like that, like be in the nature a little bit more. Like our cities are growing and growing, but then 83% of Indian Olympians come from villages. So I think we need to just get kids into sports first, and then at some point probably help them or direct them to, like, hey, what about this? What about this? Mm-hmm. That is where we are at, realistically talking. It will take us at least 1 or 2 generations before we are able to get a system in place or get people to pursue a system which is in place, which takes us to the sporting top. Absolutely.
Well, I hope podcasts like these and conversations with people like you are a step in the right direction.
I think we need like 100 of these conversations with 100 different people, and then maybe it sounds very dark, but don't get me wrong. But it's just it is the grim reality of Indian sports, and we are doing our best. They are doing their best. The sports ministries of the country are doing their utmost best, but there are limitations. So,
well, let's hope for the best. And I have one last question for you, and that is, what is one advice you wish you had received before starting your journey, or what is one thing you wish you told your younger self?
Wow. The thing is, I've enjoyed every bit and every minute of what I've been doing so far. Mm-hmm. Everything which could have gone wrong has gone wrong twice, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Not once, but twice. Everything you can imagine, twice. But I've learned from all of that mistakes and all of those things, and it's only made me stronger. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the one who would look back in the past and have regret or remorse. Make the most of what you have right now with an eye on the horizon and keep pushing. Believe in yourself more than anyone else ever will. I would, and no one ever will. Also, if you don't believe in yourself enough, nobody else will. They will be like, hey, why would anybody want to believe in this guy because he doesn't believe in himself? I think that is where it begins and ends for me. Maybe I would tell my younger self, believe in yourself a bit harder than you do. Mm-hmm. It starts because the thing is, life is, we were born alone and we're going to die alone, so
might as well just believe in yourself the most, right?
Exactly. And then you'll be able to pursue these things, hopes and dreams, goals.
Well, this has been a great podcast, Vishwaraj. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Best of luck for the Winter Olympics coming up in 2022, and wishing you the very best of luck for the same.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to being in touch.
I hope you enjoyed this week's career discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot.